as a factory worker making weapons. Well, that means you need to pay at least 50 rubles an hour as a soldier, right? Probably more, because being a soldier is more dangerous. So then people join the army because that's where the money is. So then the civilian sectors raise the amount of money that they're paying to work there. And so the army has to raise their money. So that's actually Ukraine. That's Russia's biggest problem. It's this runaway inflation where you have too few people chasing high wages. And Ukraine doesn't necessarily have that problem.
And also, so you don't believe that Russia really needs a ceasefire right now?
No, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have a ceasefire and have your men rest. But I don't believe they need it in order to stay successful or in order to keep the pressure on Ukraine.
And also, what, from your perspective, what is Vladimir Putin trying to achieve in these negotiations right now? Because he does participate in this process. His people participate. People are meeting American colleagues in different locations around the globe. Discussions are going on right now. What are they doing? What is their objective right now in these negotiations?
I believe their objective in the negotiations is to keep the negotiations going on as long as possible. Because as long as the negotiations are going on, you can send out propaganda saying, look, we're negotiating, but this group is choosing not to engage with us, right? I think that's kind of the goal of the negotiations. It's to create the opportunity to create propaganda. And at the end of the day, you know, what you kind of have here is once a ceasefire happens, then there's really no more room to negotiate a ceasefire, right? So that's kind of an issue. So while it might seem counterintuitive that you don't want a ceasefire, even though a ceasefire would be helpful, you know, this is one of those things that's Russia in a nutshell, right? Russia always seems to be a little counterintuitive to what you'd expect.
And also, you're confident, according to our latest interview, that Russia will suddenly collapse. Do you feel that a ceasefire could bring the collapse of Russia closer or even more far away? How could this influence Russia's ability to exist as a state, as a united state?
Russia could certainly collapse. That is a possibility. I don't think a ceasefire would cause a collapse, but I certainly think that if certain circumstances aren't met, especially if, one of the things President Trump had talked about was secondary sanctions, where the United States sanctions countries that are purchasing Russian oil. If you get to the point where nobody wants to buy Russian oil, it becomes very, very difficult to pay soldiers. And once that happens, like, soldiers are going to be loyal to a point, right? They're going to be loyal to the point that once they stop getting paid, that's a problem. And if it turns out they stop getting paid, kind of the next thing that happens is they start looking for ways to make money. And that's how soldiers become a mob, right? Now, the good thing about Ukraine is that Ukraine can get some funding from Europe in order to pay their soldiers' salaries. So they're not really an issue. But once you start seeing soldiers who don't get paid, they turn into mercenaries. And once they turn into mercenaries, now you have a mob. And that isn't good.
And it was one time in the history, Prigozhin march on Moscow. Yeah. Russia's mercenaries, led by Yevgeny Prigozhin, he was killed by probably Vladimir Putin, but they tried to capture Moscow to decapitate Vladimir Putin's regime. And so you're talking about this threat to the Russian regime. And that's why Kremlin is really afraid of mercenaries.
Yeah. I mean, look, every soldier is what, 2-3 meals away from becoming a mercenary, right? Like when you think about it, they're 2, 3 paychecks away from becoming a mercenary. So that's kind of something to think about. If Russia runs out of money to fund the war, it's not going to turn out good for Russia.
There could be even chaos inside Russia and inside Vladimir Putin's inner circle regarding what we are going to do with this war and unpaid soldiers.
Yeah, that could certainly be an issue. That could certainly be an issue where, look, soldiers expect to get paid, and soldiers expect to have certain kinds of benefits, veterans benefits and so on. And when that goes away, you have young men who are physically fit, who are trained to use firearms. Granted, Russia's firearm laws are not as liberal as the laws of the United States, but that's never stopped young men with ideas from getting guns.
And also, let's cover recent developments on the ground. Russia has conducted another assault in the south of Ukraine. However, Russia failed to achieve any kind of success. Ukrainian army repelled this attack, and Russia faced unsustainable losses again. Do you feel that Russia is trying to achieve something that is unachievable? It's impossible to achieve something like that, to also capture even more Ukrainian land on the other side of Dnipro River. All the land Vladimir Putin claims is the Russian one.
Well, I'm sure they'd certainly like to, right? Like that is the ultimate goal. It's certainly like to take that land. The question is whether it's actually feasible to do so. And war is hard. And amphibious invasions are pretty darn hard too, or river crossings are pretty darn hard too. And I got to tell you, you can train for something as much as you'd like, but Murphy's Law, I don't know if that translates well into Ukrainian. The law of whatever can go wrong will go wrong. That always seems to rear its head whenever there's any kind of military operation. And one of the huge issues with Russia is that they just don't have the non-commissioned officers, the sergeants, who can make calls on the ground and respond to changing situations.
And also, you just mentioned about the military operation. United Kingdom, France, and other European allies are preparing this big plan to deploy troops to Ukraine as a part of the coalition of willing. After ceasefire, what is your assessment of this idea from a military point of view? Is this feasible for European allies without American backstop?
Well, I mean, yes. France and Great Britain are two of the countries that could actually provide peacekeepers, mainly because they have the logistical tail to support them. I don't know how long they would be able to do it financially, or what that would look like, specifically with having their troops rotate in and out. I think France can field 3 divisions. The UK can field 2 if they activate their reserves. So there might not be physically enough troops. They might only be able to send 1 or 2 brigades each. And so now we're talking maybe 1,200 troops. That isn't a lot to cover an entire border. When you consider, Ukraine tends to have 1 brigade on the border every, I believe it's 20 miles or so. What that translates into kilometers is 25, maybe 20, I guess 26 or so, 28, I think, 28 kilometers roughly. They have a brigade. So that's the idea of fielding 3 brigades across the entire Ukrainian front. That's just, the front is just so massive. It's very difficult to do something like this without the actual physical troops. And I don't really know how Great Britain or the UK can square that circle, at least not without using troops from third-party countries, maybe non-aligned countries like Brazil or Indonesia.